Today, 3 men who were supposed to never walk free did just that. They were called the West Memphis Three, convicted of murdering 3 Cub Scouts in West Memphis, Arkansas in 1993, despite any physical evidence linking them to the crime.
Hey, can you hear me?
Can't see anything, but I can hear you.
Oh, what can I do? There. 1, 2, 3. 1,
Yes,
2, 3.
you sound great.
Excellent.
Please state your name for the court.
Damien Wayne ECHOLS.
I mean, obviously, your story's been covered in a lot of different media, documentaries, books. At what point during the trial did you think they're going to charge me with this? Did you believe that there's a chance that the system might actually, that justice would prevail?
I did in the beginning, and I think it's like a lot of it is due to, like, in America, how you're raised on all of these cop shows and court shows and all this, where it's like the good guy always wins, the truth always comes out. So you keep waiting for that to happen for a while. But then, you start to realize things like so much of it is based on politics that you don't realize in the beginning. You think that these people like judges and prosecutors and attorney generals, that they have these positions because they're somehow moral, upstanding people who want to do what's right for society. You don't realize until sometimes years down the road that these people are politicians. Their number one priority is winning the next election. And when it dawns on you that these people are willing to put you to death, they are willing to murder you, knowing that you're innocent, if it's going to increase their chances of winning the next election, it kind of destroys your faith in humanity a little bit.
When you are told that you are sentenced to death, what's that thought process like?
It's one of those things that people who have seen the documentaries or seen news footage, they always say, whenever that was happening, you seemed like you were so calm. And I always try to explain to them that that's not calm you're seeing, that's shock and trauma. Like, you are in such a deep state of shock at what is happening to you that it's almost like you can't register any kind of reaction. You keep thinking all the way up until that point that surely someone is going to fix this situation. It's almost like you can't accept that it's going to happen. You keep thinking someone's got to realize what's going on here. Someone's got to stand up at any second and stop this and fix this. And it just never happens. It keeps going and going and going. And it's almost like your mind cannot even fully comprehend the horror of the situation you're in. You're just sort of doing everything you can do to keep putting one foot in front of the other and not collapse. There's really no time inside prison. Not only was I locked up for almost 20 years, but the last almost decade of that, I was in solitary confinement. It causes a lot of brain trauma that we didn't even realize was happening at the time. It messed me up in ways like, after I got out, we realized I didn't have facial recognition. I didn't have voice recognition, just because when you're in solitary confinement, you're not seeing a bunch of faces. You're not hearing a bunch of voices. It takes a horrendous toll on your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. It destroys you in every way that a human being can be destroyed. The physical toll that it was taking on my body was one of the things that pushed me so hard to keep learning about, like, meditation and energy work and stuff like that. Because, there were times when I had been, like, severely beaten by prison guards. It had caused a lot of damage to my body. They're looking at you like you're already dead. So they're not going to spend a lot of time and money and energy taking care of someone that they plan on killing at some point in the future. The level of violence that I saw in there, that alone changes you in ways that I will never be able to articulate to anyone out here in the world. I had been there less than a year when I saw someone stabbed to death one day. When you see something like that, I cried for about 3 straight days, and I can't even tell you why I was crying. All I knew was that it had done something to me. It had destroyed it had hurt me on some level that I could never describe to anyone, to see something like that. Nobody should ever be in a situation where stuff like that is happening.
Was there ever a point where you accepted your fate?
I had to train myself to live in the present moment. You know, Lao Tzu said that if you live in the past, you're going to be perpetually depressed. And if you live in the future, you are always going to live in anxiety. The only way you are ever going to know peace is if you live in the present moment. So one of the things I started doing pretty soon after I got there was just building a life for myself, something to focus on, something to do to help me keep changing and growing and learning. You know, somebody told me whenever I first got there, they said, you have two choices. You can either sit in this cell and go insane like a lot of people here do, or you can turn this cell into a monastery and keep trying to further your own development. And you know, I didn't want to become like so many of the people that I saw around me. So I chose the latter and did everything I could to turn my cell into a monastery to keep improving myself.
At what point during your time in prison did you start to actually believe that you're getting out of there?
The first letter that I ever received from my wife. We didn't know each other at the time. She had seen the documentaries about the case and they had a profound impact on her. And she just wrote to me and started asking, what can I do to help? And eventually, you know, we ended up getting married. We've been together about 20 years. But from the very first letter I got from her, the only way I can describe this is something in my life had clicked into place. And I knew, I can't tell you how I knew this, but I knew from that point on, these people cannot kill me now. Like, I am safe. They can still do horrible things to me, but they cannot murder me. I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know why, but I know that somehow everything is going to work out okay here.
I pulled up this quote of yours. This case was nothing out of the ordinary. This happens all the time. Can you speak to that?
They're estimating now that as many as 1 out of every 10 people who are executed may be innocent. If 1 out of every 10 planes crashed, nobody would fly. People would demand that something be done about the situation before they would start flying again. But most people don't realize that that's the state of the judicial system. People think that my case was something out of the ordinary, when in reality, the only thing that made my case special in any way whatsoever was the fact that they had cameras in the courtroom and caught it on film. If not for that, these people would have killed me. And most people don't have that.
You know, obviously, as a Buddhist myself, the first precept preaches that no life really should be taken. For some, they hear of someone that's, just to say, you know, someone that's murdered children. Some people will see that as, what's wrong with them being killed? What would you say to justify not killing this person?
Going back to what you were saying, like the first precept of Buddhism is not to take life. If you accept like spirituality as a valid part of our existence in this realm, especially things like in the Buddhist traditions, when you're talking about reincarnation, then you're really not stopping anything. You know, you are just basically sending this person that probably hasn't learned whatever lesson they were supposed to learn on to however they're going to incarnate again and however that energy is going to manifest again. You know, I was in prison for almost 20 years, and during that time, I never saw one single shred of anything that could be even remotely considered a rehabilitative process. Nothing, no sort of programs, nothing whatsoever. Maybe it's worth our while to put time and energy and effort into ways of understanding and figuring out how to change people for the better. In the beginning, we were looking at it like the finish line or the goal line was to get me off of death row, to prevent me from being executed. That was what we were working towards. We didn't even think about what comes after that. I literally went from solitary confinement one day to the streets of Manhattan the next, and it caused me to have a complete and absolute nervous breakdown. You know, you don't think about things like that, like how hard it's going to be to adjust to life out here. Almost everyone is going to get out of prison at some point. So we could get the most benefit out of getting out of this kind of us versus them sort of mentality, out of seeing someone as the enemy and seeing the judicial system as a way to punish people instead of rehabilitate them in some way. I think even if the people in there are guilty, 100% guilty, it behooves us more as a society to dedicate ourselves to helping these people transform in some way so that they have something of benefit to give back to the world and maybe make up for some of the stuff they've done versus, just killing them and looking at them as an enemy. I think if we put time and money and energy into educating people, changing people, I think the benefits of that would be vastly superior than spending, untold amounts of money and time executing people. Because another thing that people don't realize is it costs more money to execute someone than it does to keep them in prison for the rest of their lives. And not only that, we think that these executions are just being carried out due to justice reasons. But for example, one of the things that I did a couple of years ago, I actually went back to Arkansas with Johnny Depp to try to get the state to not carry out a series of executions. They were planning on executing like 8 men over a few days time period for no other reason than that the drug that they used to do lethal injections was about to expire, and they wanted to use it all up before it expired.
My name is Damien ECHOLS. I'm 36 years old and released today from death row for a crime I did not commit.
Don't let this interview, don't let this story be the end of your process of learning about the death penalty and about the U.S. prison system as a whole. Let it be a starting point. Take what you hear here and start looking into, other sources to educate yourself more about what's going on. I think you'll really be shocked. And I think when you really do start to see the truth behind, some of what's going on, it will make you want to change it in some way.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. I really do appreciate it.
Of course.
It really was eye-opening.
I appreciate you helping to get the word out about stuff like this.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.